Manchukuo was a puppet state in northeast China and Inner Mongolia, which was governed under a form of constitutional monarchy. The area, collectively known as Manchuria by Westerners and Japanese, was designated by China's erstwhile Qing Dynasty as the homeland of the ruling family's ethnic group, the Manchus. But the Manchus themselves never used Manchuria as a place name to refer to the area. In 1931, the region was seized by Japan following the Mukden incident, and a pro-Japanese government was installed 1 year later with Pui, the last Qing emperor, as the nominal regent and emperor. Manchukuo's government was abolished in 1945 after the defeat of Imperial Japan at the end of World War II. The territories formerly claimed by the puppet state were first seized in the Soviet invasion of Manchuria in August 1945, and then formally transferred to Chinese administration in the following year. Manchus formed a minority in Manchukuo, whose largest ethnic group were Han Chinese. The population of Koreans increased during the Manchukuo period, and there were also Japanese, Mongols, White Russians and other minorities. The Mongol regions of western Manchukuo were ruled under a slightly different system in acknowledgement of the Mongolian traditions there. The southern part of the Liaodong Peninsula was ruled by Japan as the Kwantung Least Territory. History. Terminology. Manchuria is a transcription of the Japanese reading of the Chinese word, which means Manchuria, which in Japanese is Manchu, which in turn dates from the 19th century. The name Manzhou was invented and given to the Jurchen people by Hong Taiji in 1635 as a new name for their ethnic group. However, the name Manchuria was never used by the Manchus or the Qing dynasty itself to refer to their homeland. According to the Japanese scholar Junko Miyawaki Okada, the Japanese geographer Takahashi Keijiyasu was the first to use the term as a place name in 1809 in the Nippon Henkai Ryakuzu, and it was from that work where Westerners adopted the name. According to Mark C. Elliott, Katsuragawa Hoshu's 1794 work, the Hokus Bunryaku was where first appeared as a place name in two maps included in the work, Ashia Zenzu, and Chikyu Hankyusazu, which were also created by Katsuragawa, then began to appear as a place names in more maps created by Japanese like Kondi Juzo, Takahashi Keijiyasu, Baba Sadayoshi, and Yamada Ren. These maps were brought to Europe by the Dutch Philip von Siebold. According to Nakami Tatsuo, Philip Franz von Siebold was the one who brought the usage of the term Manchuria to Europeans, after borrowing it from the Japanese, who were the first to use it in a geographic manner in the 18th century. While neither the Manchu nor Chinese languages had a term in their own language equivalent to Manchuria as a geographic place name. According to Bill Sewell, it was Europeans who first started using Manchuria as a name to refer to the location, and it is not a genuine geographic term, the historian Gavin McCormack agreed with Robert H. G. Lee's statement that the term Manchuria or Manchu is a modern creation used mainly by Westerners and Japanese, with McCormack writing that the term Manchuria is imperialistic in nature and has no precise meaning, since the Japanese deliberately promoted the use of Manchuria as a geographic name to promote its separation from China while they were setting up their puppet state of Manchukuo. Background: the Japanese had their own motive for deliberately spreading the usage of the term Manchuria. The historian Norman Smith wrote that the term Manchuria is controversial. Professor Mariko Asano Tamanoi said that she should use the term in quotation marks when referring to Manchuria. Herbert Giles wrote that Manchuria was unknown to the Manchus themselves as a geographical expression. In his 2012 dissertation on the Jurchen people to obtain a Doctor of Philosophy degree in history from the University of Washington, Professor Chad D. Garcia noted that usage of the term Manchuria is out of favor in currently scholarly practice, and he did away with using the term, using instead the Northeast, or referring to specific geographical features. The Qing Dynasty, which replaced the Shun and Ming dynasties in China, was founded by Manchus from Manchuria. The Manchu emperor separated their homeland in Jilin and Heilongjiang from the Han Liaoning province with the Willow Palisade. This ethnic division continued until the Qing dynasty encouraged massive immigration of Han in the 19th century during Chang Guandong to prevent the Russians from seizing the area from the Qing. After conquering the Ming, the Qing identified their state as China, and referred to it as Dalim Bai Gurun in Manchu. The Qing equated the lands of the Qing state as China, in both the Chinese and Manchu languages, defining China as a multi-ethnic state, rejecting the idea that China only meant Han areas, proclaiming that both Han and non-Han peoples were part of China, using China to refer to the Qing in official documents, international treaties, and foreign affairs, and the Chinese language referred to Chinese, Manchu, and Mongol languages, and the term Chinese people referred to all Han, Manchus, and Mongol subjects of the Qing. The lands in Manchuria were explicitly stated by the Qing to belong to China, in Qing edicts and in the Treaty of Nerchinsk. During the Qing dynasty, the area of Manchuria was known as the Three Eastern Provinces, since 1683 when Jilin and Heilongjiang were separated, even though it was not until 1907 that they were turned into actual provinces. The area of Manchuria was then converted into 3 provinces by the late Qing government in 1907. Since then, the 3 Northeast provinces was officially used by the Qing government in China to refer to this region, and the poster viceroy of 3 Northeast provinces was established to take charge of these provinces. During its reign, the Qing dynasty became highly integrated with Chinese culture. The dynasty reached its height in the 18th century, during which both territory and population were increased. However, its military power weakened thereafter and, faced with massive rebellions and defeat in wars, the Qing dynasty declined after the mid-19th century. As the power of the court in Beijing weakened, many outlying areas either broke free or fell under the control of imperialist powers. In the 19th century, Imperial Russia was most interested in the northern lands of the Qing Empire. In 1858, Russia gained control over a huge tract of land called Outer Manchuria thanks to the supplementary Treaty of Beijing that ended the Second Opium War. But Russia was not satisfied, and, as the Qing dynasty continued to weaken, they made further efforts to take control of the rest of Manchuria. Inner Manchuria came under strong Russian influence in the 1890s with the building of the Chinese Eastern Railway through Harbin to Vladivostok. Origins as a direct result of the Russo-Japanese War. Japanese influence replaced Russia's in Inner Manchuria. In 1906, Japan laid the South Manchurian Railway to Port Arthur. Between World War I and World War II, Manchuria became a political and military battleground between Russia, Japan, and China. Japan moved into Outer Manchuria as a result of the chaos following the Russian Revolution of 1917. A combination of Soviet military successes and American economic pressure forced the Japanese to withdraw from the area, however, and Outer Manchuria returned to Soviet control by 1925. During the warlord period in China, the warlord Zhang Zuolin established himself in Inner Manchuria with Japanese backing. Later, the Japanese Kwantung Army found him too independent, so he was assassinated in 1928. After the Japanese invasion of Manchuria in 1931, Japanese militarists moved forward to separate the region from Chinese control and to create a Japanese-aligned puppet state. To create an air of legitimacy, the last emperor of China, Pui, was invited to come with his followers and act as the head of state for Manchuria. One of his faithful companions was Zheng Xiaoxu, a Qing reformist and loyalist. On 18 February 1932, the Manchu state was proclaimed and recognized by Japan on 15 September 1932 through the Japan-Manchukuo Protocol. After the assassination of Japanese Prime Minister Inukai Tsuyoshi, the city of Changchun, renamed Sinking, became the capital of the new entity. Chinese in Manchuria organized volunteer armies to oppose the Japanese, and the new state required a war lasting several years to pacify the country. The Japanese initially installed Pui as head of state in 1932, and 2 years later he was declared Emperor of Manchukuo with the era name of Qing. Manchukuo thus became the Great Manchurian Empire, sometimes termed Manchukuo. Zheng Xiaoxu served as Manchukuo's first prime minister until 1935, when Zhang Jingyi succeeded him. Pui was nothing more than a figurehead, and real authority rested in the hands of the Japanese military officials. An imperial palace was specially built for the emperor. The Manchu ministers all served as front men for their Japanese vice-ministers, who made all decisions. In this manner, Japan formally detached Manchukuo from China in the course of the 1930s. With Japanese investment and rich natural resources, the area became an industrial powerhouse. Manchukuo had its own issued bank notes and postal stamps. Several independent banks were founded as well. In 1935, Manchukuo bought the Chinese Eastern Railway from the Soviet Union. Diplomatic recognition: China did not recognize Manchukuo, but the two sides established official ties for trade, communications and transportation. In 1933, the League of Nations adopted the Lytton Report, declaring that Manchuria remained rightfully part of China, leading Japan to resign its membership. The Manchukuo case persuaded the United States to articulate the so-called Stimson Doctrine, under which international recognition was withheld from changes in the international system created by force of arms. In spite of the League of Nations approach, the new state was diplomatically recognized by El Salvador and the Dominican Republic, the Soviet Union, Italy, Spain, Germany and Hungary. It is commonly believed that the Holy See established diplomatic relations with Manchukuo in 1934, but the Holy See never did so. This belief is partly due to the erroneous reference in Bernardo Bertolucci's 1987 film The Last Emperor that the Holy See diplomatically recognized Manchukuo. Bishop Augustinus Pierre Gaspes was appointed as a representative ad tempus of the Holy See and of the Catholic missions of Manchukuo to the government of Manchukuo by the congregations of propagandified and not by the Secretariat of State responsible for diplomatic relations with states. After the outbreak of World War II, the state was recognized by Slovakia, Vichy France, Romania, Bulgaria, Finland, Denmark, Croatia, all controlled or influenced by Japan's ally Germany, as well as by China's Wang Jingwei government. Thailand and the Philippines, all under Japanese control. World War II and aftermath. Before World War II, the Japanese colonized Manchukuo and used it as a base from which to invade China. In the summer of 1939, a border dispute between Manchukuo and the Mongolian People's Republic resulted in the Battle of Kar-Khin-Gol. During this battle, a combined Soviet-Mongolian force defeated the Japanese Kwantung Army supported by limited Manchukuoan forces. On 8 August 1945, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan, in accordance with the agreement at the Yalta Conference, and invaded Manchukuo from Outer Manchuria and Outer Mongolia. This was called Manchurian Strategic Offensive Operation. During the Soviet offensive, the Army of Manchukuo, on paper a 200,000-man force, performed poorly and whole units surrendered to the Soviets without firing a single shot. There were even cases of armed riots and mutinies against the Japanese forces. Emperor Qing had hoped to escape to Japan to surrender to the Americans. but the Soviets captured him and eventually extradited him to the communist government in China, where the authorities had him imprisoned as a war criminal along with all other captured Manchukuo officials. From 1945 to 1948, Manchuria served as a base area for the People's Liberation Army in the Chinese Civil War against the National Revolutionary Army. The Chinese Communists used Manchuria as a staging ground until the final nationalist retreat to Taiwan in 1949. Many Manchukuo Army and Japanese cantongun personnel served with the Communist troops during the Chinese Civil War against the nationalist forces. Most of the 1.5 million Japanese who had been left in Manchukuo at the end of World War II were sent back to their homeland in 1946 to 1948 by U.S. Navy ships in the operation now known as the Japanese Repatriation from Huludao. Politics. Historians generally consider Manchukuo a puppet state of Imperial Japan because of the Japanese military's strong presence and strict control of the government administration. Chinese historians generally refer to the state as Wei Manchukuo. Some historians see Manchukuo as an effort at building a glorified Japanese state in mainland Asia that deteriorated due to the pressures of war. The independence of Manchuria was proclaimed on the 18th of February 1932, and renamed to Manchukuo. The Japanese military commander appointed Pui as regent for the time being, stating that he would become Emperor of Manchukuo but could not reign using the title of Emperor of the Great Qing Empire as he once held. Manchukuo was proclaimed a monarchy on 1 March 1934, with Pui assuming the throne under the reign name of Emperor Kangde. Pui was assisted in his executive duties by a Privy Council, and a General Affairs State Council. This State Council was the center of political power, and consisted of several cabinet ministers, each assisted by a Japanese vice minister. The commanding officer of the Kwantung Army in Manchukuo was additionally the Japanese ambassador to Manchukuo. He functioned in a manner similar to that of a British resident officer in British overseas protectorates, with the power to veto decisions by the emperor. The Kwantung Army leadership placed Japanese vice ministers in his cabinet, while all Chinese advisors gradually resigned or were dismissed. The Legislative Council was largely a ceremonial body, existing to rubber stamp decisions issued by the State Council. The only authorized political party was the government-sponsored Concordia Association. Although various émigré groups were permitted their own political associations. When the Japanese surrender was announced on 15 August 1945, Pui was asked to abdicate, which he did. Head of State Prime Minister Administrative Divisions. See List of administrative divisions of Manchukuo for a complete list of prefecture-level divisions. During its short-lived existence, Manchukuo was divided into between 5 and 19 provinces, 1 special ward of Pimen and 2 special cities which were Sinking and Harbin. Each province was divided into between 4 and 24 prefectures. Pimen lasted less than 3 years and Harbin was later incorporated into Bingqiang province. Lungqiang also existed as a province in 1932, before being divided into Haiho, Lungqiang and Sangqiang in 1934. Antung and Qinchao provinces separated themselves from Fengshan, while Bingqiang and Qiantao from Kirin separated themselves in the same year.